I'm Katie, and you're tuned in to the Kat and Katie Show.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Welcome
to the
Kat and Katie Show. Sorry, welcome to the Kat and Katie Show. Today we're going to be looking at assessments. The assessments we're looking at today is what some of you may have seen as called legacy assessments, or their upload-download assessments. So we'll look at what are the assessments, how are they useful, and then we'll look at the steps is what you have to do to set them up. So just to reiterate, today we're going to be looking at how your students can log into the student portal and download assessment material. Maybe it's a task sheet, or maybe it's an actual assessment that they have to complete in a PDF, and how they then upload it. This is not anything to do with our online assessments that we just recently released. This is to do with our what some of you may see as our legacy assessments. So if you have our standard aXcelerate package, you would find assessments sit under your course page. If you have our Turbo aXcelerate package, you would see legacy assessments underneath your course page, but both of them sit in the same area, and that's what we'll be looking at today.
And yeah, as Kat described, we have had this type of assessment for a very long time, and it is available to anyone on our standard package, which is most of our users at this stage.
Yeah.
But for anyone using Turbo, it is called Legacy, because with Turbo you have your online assessment feature. But in essence, it's describing being able to create a little placeholder for people to upload assessment tasks against. And there's nice little workflows as well. So as an example, just before you get into it, I guess as a high level, these assessments enable your student or your students to be able to upload, as Kat said, download, upload, for that to then send an email to your trainer, for your trainer to then go and mark, for that to send another email back to your student to say your trainer's just marked it. So there's quite a few things that they do as well, so they can be very helpful.
And these workflows sit within the feature as well. So it's a simple click of the button. It's not a workflow that we have to set up that we looked at last week.
The other thing to note as well is that you do not have to have students logging into our student portal to actually upload and use this assessment area. If you're wanting to just simply have a place to upload RPL evidence or upload particular task sheets, but you're not in a position at the moment where your students want to log in, or you don't want them logging into the aXcelerate portal, that's not a problem. You can still use this assessment to be able to actually upload assessment tasks or evidence.
Maybe they submit it in person or via USB, and it's your trainers or your administrators that are uploading the evidence so that you have that for records.
Stored against the unit, against the qual.
Yeah. So what we might start off with is having a look at the end result, and what does it look like from an administrator's point of view, and what does it look like from a student's point of view, and some functionalities. Also, what does it look like from the trainer's point of view? And then we'll jump into the step-by-step processes.
So Kat is going to be running today, and I'm going to be moderating. So if you do have any questions along the way, please just let me know, and I will answer them as best I can while trying to type frantically to answer them.
All right. Well, without further ado, let's get started.
Stay tuned.
All right. So I'll just jump into my account here and start to share my screen again. All right. So what we will be looking at is, first I'll look at the administrator's portal. So if I go into an existing class, now I'm not sure if I've got a class in here, but I may have a class called assessments. I might just type it in the top. If I don't, I can just simply go into, there it is, assessment example. So if I go into this class here, and I go into any student, let's go into Katie. When I scroll down, I can see these little buttons next to each enrollment. And this signifies, or this tells me that I have an assessment linked to this unit of competency. There will be an icon per assessment. So you might have 2 assessments, 5 assessments, 10 assessments against each unit of competency. If I drill into the unit of competency, I would see the assessment down the bottom, and any submissions against that assessment I'll be able to see by expanding the button. So this is how we would see it from the trainer's perspective, from the administrator's perspective. From the trainer's perspective, it's exactly the same. So a trainer, through the trainer portal, will be able to come in, and with the right permissions, they'll be able to go into the unit and submit assessment evidence. So if I was to submit evidence, I can say they submitted this evidence in person. I can choose a file to upload. I know I'm just choosing a screenshot, but I'll just do it for this instance. And then I can assess and say that they were satisfactory. I was a trainer. You can see it automatically defaults to me, but I can change it if I'm an administrator doing it on behalf of a trainer. and I'll say that it was today. And this is the workflows that we were referring to. So it's a simple tick of the button. It's not a big workflow that you have to set up in the background. And basically it's saying, once I mark this as competent or as satisfactory, do I want to send an email to the student? It automatically says yes, notify the student, and there are some templates here I can choose from. There's a standard aXcelerate notification. At this point as well, I can also choose the file to upload, which is a marked file if it's got comments on it. But if I submit that assessment, what we'll now see is next to Katie, we have this little tick to say that she's marked the assessment. Now we will look through the session, and we're just looking at the end result here. So let me jump back into the class and have a look if I'm enrolled. Yes. So I'll just jump into my student portal. And if I go into assessment example, I'll go into assessments with Wade in a different example. And what we can see is the same things next to each unit. I can jump into that and see what my marked file looked like if there was one, any comments that have been applied, or if I just jump back to one that hasn't been resulted, I can now submit my assessment or upload another submission if I failed. What we also have in the student portal, which I don't think is set up for this one, is in the home icon. If I scroll down, yes it is, I can see my next due assessment. So by default, this is only one table, and that one table will only ever show you the next assessment that's due. I can submit now, or I can click on IT assessment to have a look at the assessment, have a look at any feedback, and if applicable, download any resources attached to it, such as this view assessment task resource. As soon as I click on that, I then download this information technology assessment, which is just information technology assessment version 1, but this might be the task sheet. So we've looked at what it looks like from the administrator portal, which is the same as what it looks like from the trainer portal. And then we've looked at how it looks from the student portal and how they can view assessment tasks or submit it now. What we're going to go through now is the step-by-step processes we have to do to set this up. So what we'll first do is just look into our resource library. So if I just jump into my Finder, sorry about my little photos there, but we might have,
no one can see it.
No one can see it. Okay, it's okay. What I have is a Certificate 1 in Business course outline, which I know no one can see. But what I'm going to do is use the Certificate 1 in Business course outline to upload as my assessment outline. So the first thing I'm going to do is go into resources and resource library. Now we've looked into resources a bit, and what we're looking at now is training related resources. And this is referring to that resource that a student can download. So I can say add new resource, and I would like this resource to be from my computer. I'll choose my file, and I'm going to choose Certificate 1 in Business course outline. And I just might rename this to say assessment task sheet. I can apply different compliance standards, so 1.4, 1.3 for example. This is version 1.5 and I review this every 6 months. When I review it, I'll upload my new revision, but I want students to download the most latest version. So when they click on that view assessment resources or view assessment task, they'll be downloading the most recent version. I have to make sure that if I want my students to download this, I tick students, and if I want my trainers to see it via the trainer portal, I also select trainers. Now at this stage, I want my resource to be a training related resource or activity, and I want it to be linked to a qualification or a workshop. So I'm just going to press on submit. As soon as I press on submit, I then get brought to this page here, which is relating it to qualifications, subjects, or workshops. Now remember that yours will change depending on the terminology that you use. But essentially what I'm doing here is specifying that when a student logs into a student portal, where would they see that resource? And also, if a trainer was to log into the trainer portal and they have restricted access to resources, I need to link it to the qualifications that they're teaching. So if I select here, Certificate 1 in Business, I'm specifying that any person, any student who's enrolled in Certificate 1 in Business, no matter what the units are, they would see the resource in their student portal under resources. They would also see the resource under the qualification. Likewise, for your trainers, if I've marked my trainer to teach the Certificate 1 in Business and they're against the class and I've restricted their resources, they'll be able to see this only if I have Certificate 1 in Business as the class they're teaching. For the subjects, I can go into the subjects and say link it to one or more subjects or units of competency. And what I'm doing here is specifying that I don't want a student to see it just because they're enrolled in Certificate 1 in Business. As we can see, I have multiple streams for Certificate 1 in Business. So I don't want to specify just the qualification because everyone would see it no matter what stream they're in, or what qualification they're in, sorry, or units they're enrolled in. I want to be able to specify the exact unit they're in. I'm actually going to say Certificate 1 in Business, and then I'm also going to go into, so I'm just trying to find a unit of competency here. I'm going to say that in the Certificate 3 in Customer Service, that the BSB SUS 301A is the unit that I'm linking it to. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying that if someone's enrolled in the qualification Certificate 1 in Business, no matter which units you've enrolled them in, they would see this resource. But in this instance, I'm linking it to just one subject, which means a student has to be enrolled in the subject, no matter what qualification it falls under, and they'll see the resource. The reason why I'm doing two is so that we can look at the two different ways that it displays in the student portal. So that's the very first thing I need to do is upload my task list or upload my assessment to the resource library, ensuring that I've linked it to the right units and ensuring that I have given it at least student access. The only reason why you would have to put a resource in here is if you want the students to upload and download the assessment task. Okay, or you want the students to be able to download what the assessment task is. As we discussed at the beginning, as Katie said, is that a lot of people might use this just to manage the evidence against the students and not necessarily give access to the student portal. So if you don't want your students downloading anything from the student portal, you do not have to do this step.
And we have, you know, this could be you. We have quite a few clients who might actually upload things like RPL evidence or just evidence of people's assessment against, say, their portfolio area or even against notes as an upload. We've seen that before. It's not to say that that is incorrect, but to have that relationship with, you know, an actual name that you're relating an upload to against a unit, against a qual, you know, for a particular student, just makes trying to pull that up for, say, an auditing type situation so much easier. And it's obviously then foolproof. You know, you can't accidentally upload, say, the same file name against another note for another student and then it goes missing. And yeah, so there's just a few things that it kind of eradicates as well.
Yeah. Okay, so that's step one. Step two is actually going to create the assessment. And there's multiple ways, there's actually only two ways that you can create the assessment. And the two ways are creating the assessments underneath assessments here. Remember, if you're part of our Turbo package, you would see this as legacy assessments. So the two ways to do it is via the assessments here, or you can do it via the subject. And we're going to do it both ways. The reason why you would do it via assessment is if you were doing something holistically. So let's have a look. We'll jump into assessments, and I'm going to say I first have to select my qualification. Once I select my qualification, I can then see any assessments that already exist against the units, and I can add a new assessment. I can click on any one of these to update them as well, if I'm coming in to update an assessment. But I'm just going to add a new assessment, and I select which units I want to link it to. So you can link it just to one, or this is the opportunity if you were delivering a holistic assessment to select multiple units of competency. And I'll create new assessment. So I'm going to call this business case studies. And we can see the order of assessment automatically defaults to 3. Now, the reason why this happened is that there's already 2 assessments against each one of these units of competency, so it automatically updates to 3. I can push it to number 1, but then you'll have 2 in the number 1 position. I can go and update all the other ones if I wanted this to be the first assessment. You'll notice that when you are used to the framework of the assessment builder, or used to the assessments framework, that you would upload the assessments in the order that you want them to be delivered because it automatically happens for you. Now my subject percentage weighting here is if I was offering 3 assessments. So a lot of you may have been involved in study that had assessment weightings against them. So for example, you might have a oral presentation that's worth 20% of your total marks. Then you might have a exam that's worth 30%. And then you might have your final case study, which is worth 50%. So you can enter in the weighting of that actual assessment. Of course, you know, someone has to get most of the results from the highest weighting subject, but it's just a way to manage and track that weighting. It's not mandatory, so you don't need to put it in. If this was an exam, you can also enter in time allowed. Again, you do not have to. The only mandatory items are assessment title and mode. The mode that I can select here is the mode of assessments. Now we'll have a look shortly after I've looked at different ways you can upload assessments, how you can change these modes. And this is similar to terminology, where you've got the opportunity to change terminology. You also have the opportunity to change the assessment mode, and we refer to them as assessment aliases. You can see that I've got some abbreviations here, which I will also show you shortly how to create those abbreviations. But if I have a training plan, such as a Queensland training plan, that assessments have to be displayed on, the code is what's taken. So you might have a little column that says every single assessment, and rather than seeing theory work, oral presentation, practical demonstration, it would say TWOPPD. And then you can put a legend in there as well. We have to select a mode, so I'm going to call this one, I'll call it group assignment. I can prevent submissions from the student portal after the due date, so no one can submit after the due date. And this score is something that's very important. So by default, every single score is set to 1 and 1, which means that it's either satisfactory or non-satisfactory. And when we had a look at, just very, very briefly, we went into Katie's profile and we had a look at how you submit evidence and then how you result that assessment evidence. We had a satisfactory or not satisfactory result. You can change the rating if you had, for example, this assessment, to pass it, you have to get 80 out of 120 points, for example, or 80 out of 100 points. You can change how you rate it. But if it is satisfactory or not satisfactory, it's just a 1 and a 1. Now here I've got my resource. If you're following along while we are doing this as well and you do not see a drop-down menu, it means that you have not done the first step, where you created a resource and linked that resource to the qualification or linked that resource to the unit of competency. Now, I cannot see, oh, it is assessment task sheet, sorry. Assessment task sheet version 1.5. And then I can select, whoops. I can select my assessors. You can see that I can update trainer competencies. But these assessors here are only people who are set to train and assess, or assess only for some or all of the units of competency. So I'm going to select Bobby Smith. We can see that we can select multiple people. So I'll select Bobby Smith and Kat Sabalo are the 2 people who will be responsible for assessing these assessments. And submit. And now we've got the business case study sitting in the 3rd position for each unit of competency. Like I said, we can easily go into the theory work and we can change this order of assessment. Because theory work was the first one we put in there, we cannot change it now. So it's best that we do upload them in the order that you would like them to be presented. So let's have a look at how we can create some of these modes, and then we'll go and add a second assessment. So in your settings, under system settings, under additional options, and right down the bottom, you have an area that usually is set to no unless you've defaulted it to yes, that says customize assessment methods. And I'll click on yes. And these are our labels. So the original label is what's hard-coded in aXcelerate and would automatically be set by default. And then we have an alias. And that's where you can update. So we can see that written assignment was changed to theory work, and that's what we saw in our drop-down list. The only way to reorder them is to write them in the list here. So we can see this is the list that they appear in that drop-down menu. So I didn't like any of the ones I used because this was like a case study. So I'm going to change e-learning to a case study because e-learning is done in a different area. And I'll call that CS. And you can make as many changes as you wish. And I'll save those settings. So the second way to create the assessment is under courses and subjects. And this is if you're doing it for one subject. So for my example of my BSB SUS 301A, I'm going to go into that actual assessment or unit of competency or unit, whatever you refer to it as. And down the bottom, I have a section called Subject Assessments. And I'll go Add New Assessment. And this brings me to this page. Exactly the same page, exactly the same fields, but it's now only for one unit of competency, not holistic units of competency. So I can do it from the assessments page when I'm doing it from multiple units underneath one qualification, or I can do it from my subjects library. It all depends what page you're in or what is easier for you. I found some people found it easier from the subjects because it was one assessment linked to one subject, and it was easier to manage that way. Okay, I'm going to call this one the same thing. It's the same assessment, business case study. I'm going to make sure it's order number 1. It has 50% weighting, and the mode is a case study. And I'm going to say that it's actually 90 out of 100 is the pass rate, and my resource is a assessment task sheet version 1.5. And you can see I can only see the one resource here because that's the only resource that's linked to this unit of competency. And what we'll find when we go into trainers and assessors is it's saying no trainers found, and that's because I do not have any competencies assigned. So remember, your competencies can be assigned in your trainers or facilitators page. And I'll just go submit. So now I have 2 assessments that are set up. One that I created against the subject or against the unit, and one that I created again underneath courses and assessments. There's no right or wrong way. I would generally suggest that if you are doing if you are doing assessments that are holistic, so you want to link them to more than just one unit of competency, that you use this assessment area here. Or if you want to do it subject by subject, you can use the subjects, go into the subject and update it. Remembering that you can still go into this assessment section, you can still create an assessment for just one unit of competency. So this might work for you as well.
Talk about the stars.
Oh, I hadn't spoken about the stars, no. Katie can tell us about the stars that we can see here.
Okay, so these little stars here, as you can see, indicate that something has been clustered. So an assessment has been clustered. So the example that Kat set up before, where she was including 4 units when she was creating an assessment, that's very easily seen by these little yellow stars. So even though, yeah, I mean, that's basically what it describes. Anything that has been made inactive at either the unit level or the assessment level will then be striked out, as you can see in the other qual that Kat had just before. Let's have a look at that one. Yeah, so work experience, for example, has been made inactive. So you can still see it within that list, but you know that is actually not now available for any new classes that you choose to set up.
And what Katie is referring to as inactive, let's actually do that. If I go into not there, if I go into Certificate 1 in Business and go into any of these units here, and I scroll down to the assessments, you can see my assessment sits here, and I mark that to deactive for the assessment, that for the unit, that's across every single unit. So if I jump back into my assessments here, and I just refresh my page, we now see that line that goes through business case studies. And because it is a holistic assessment, even though I just made it deactive against one unit, it will then may be deactive against every single unit. So just for this example, I'm just going to go back in and make that as active. So simply pressing the play button and it's now active again. So the stars show us that we have, if I just refresh, the stars show us here that there's a holistic assessment. And that's great to see as well, because if you click on it and you quickly make changes, you're making changes to every single one of these units. In our other example, in my Certificate 3 in Customer Contact, if I scroll down, we can find my assessment here, and there's no star because it's only linked to one unit. Okay.
The other, sorry,
That's okay.
I'm interrupting you. The other thing about this view to keep in mind is that if you have created assessment against a particular unit of competency, for example, conduct customer contact, and that say fell under the Cert 4 or even the diploma in customer contact or customer service, you will also see those assessments carry over to the drop down of that particular qualification as well. So if we were to jump into, say, business and then business admin, and there was common units, you would see some of those carry across. maybe not necessarily in this view, but definitely at the unit view. So if you go jump into one of those units.
We can see it here. So we can see in the certificate 1 in business, the reason why it wasn't, well, not that it wasn't working, but the reason why we couldn't see it is that this certificate 1 in business and this certificate 1 in business are actually different codes. So this certificate 1 in business is an outdated qualification. But if we look at this certificate 1 in business with the administration stream versus the management stream, very similar apart from a few different units. But if we jump between the two of them, we have administration assistance assessment and work in teams assessment against these first two units. If I jump into the administration stream, we can see the same assessment. So what Katie is referring to is that if you create an assessment against a subject, no matter what qualification it sits under, it would always be against that qualification or that unit of competency. So what we're going to be looking into now is creating default assessments and how we can see for a particular class how we might specify which assessment we want to appear for that class if we don't want all of them to appear.
I guess the kind of, well, a nice little segue into the next section that Kat's going to be going over is the fact that even though we may end up with, say, use business equipment and resources as a unit with, say, 7 different assessments next to it, because in different, qualifications, you may have these 2 assessments used, and then in a different qualification, we may offer, say, or have 4 assessments that need to be completed as part of this unit under that qual. We can then set defaults against each of our qualifications. So Kat was going to go into that. I've probably just jumped the gun a bit, but.
So let's actually use, if I go into my certificate 1 in business, we can see that there's multiple units, but let's say for this, multiple assessments against each unit of competency. But let's say for this example, I only want to have theory work and business case studies to be available for my qualification. So I can jump into my qualification and I'll find my certificate 1 in business. And a lot of you would have seen these buttons, but maybe not sure how to use them. And that's the default assessments that you find against the unit of competency. So I can specify for this qualification, which is extremely useful for streams, as we just saw. If you create one assessment against a unit of competency that sits under multiple streams, you can go into a stream to set it as a default. So I'll jump into this default assessments here. And what we can see here is with defaults and without defaults. And this specifies what assessments have obviously a default against the qualification. So you can see as well that this assessment is not active anymore, and we've got a little warning sign and cross down. So you can clearly see that it's been deactivated. I'm actually going to remove it. And it doesn't delete the assessment, it just deletes the default. So we can see that then pushes back down to the bottom here. So I'm going to change my business case studies, and I'm going to press the plus button to say add as a default. And I'm going to say that this one is due 20 days after the class ends. Now I can put an email on submit here to say, okay, well, every time a student submits something via the student portal, make sure that Bobby Smith receives an email. And I'll add assessment default. And now we can see that default sits there. And this is useful because now every single time I create a class, we'll be able to see these assessments there by default. So I'll go back into the other units of competency and do exactly the same. So I'll remove this one and press plus on the business case study 20 days after the class ends. I'm not going to put Bobby down for this one. We can see here that I've got more units to select from, or more assessments, sorry, I keep saying units. Oopsies. Well, now you can see that you can quickly make changes as well. And the final one over here, delete these 2.
So I guess this is a good example of Kat managing, defaults, being able to delete defaults, update, edit. And I guess as Kat was saying, this is really what sets you up to be able to create a class. So it's a very good idea. We didn't mention this at the beginning, or maybe Kat did, but I missed it. It's a very good idea to make sure that you're trying to, if you're going through and you're setting up all new intakes and new classes, to ensure that all of this is done beforehand, because you don't want to be in a situation where you're going and back dating or trying to update classes that have already been created. If this assessment is already created and the defaults have been set up at this level here, which is what Kat's just shown you, it will then make creating new class so much easier, because that'll pull in all of those default, assessments for you, as opposed to, I've seen some clients who I've actually said, hey, you don't have to be setting them all up manually every time you create a new class. And that was news to them. And it's, it is a big time saver to set them up here.
Yeah, so we're going to have a look now what this class looks like and how we can have the defaults and how beneficial they are. As Katie was discussing or described, is that any changes you make to the qualification will only affect your future classes. So any past classes, even though we've created the assessment against the unit that falls under that class, the assessment won't be there, which is great because sometimes it doesn't apply to past classes. So we'll have a look at creating a new class for this business, business 1 or certificate 1 business, and then we'll have a look at looking at a past class. So I'll go into my class, and as I add a new class and I select my qualification, I'm going to scroll right down to the bottom, and if I select my units, you can now see by default I have business case studies and theory work sitting there. I can unselect it, so I can say this class is not a Moodle class, they will not be doing any Moodle work, and this class will not have theory work against collect data, and I can submit. Now of course I can't submit because I haven't filled in anything, but you can see how beneficial the default assessments are.
It could even be that you want to, for just this one class, include, say, a Moodle course that you don't want to, for any other classes, or, there's so many different ways that you can set up these defaults. But yeah, good way of describing that, Kat.
So then the other way is, how do I pull a assessment into a class that already exists? And that's going into classes here. And I'll just find something under the certificate 1 of business. This one here, not the assessment example, this one here. And if I go, maybe not that one, I'm trying to get one that has all units in it, all 5 units.
Just use business 2017, maybe. Second one down.
No, that's a different.
Cool. Oh, right.
I'll just use this one here. Perfect. So when I go into the update button, and I scroll down, and I'm going to go into this unit of competency here, I find my 2 assessments here. Now these 2 assessments are the assessments that sit against the subject, not the defaults that sit, or they're the defaults.
No, they are the defaults.
Sorry.
It's just something that's been added after the fact. So after this has been, or even unticked at the point that the class was set up. Yeah. So it still needs to be a default.
So these are the defaults that sit against the qualification, not the assessments that sit against the subject. So I can just go add both of those, and I'm just going to put a due date. You can see that the due date, which is today, also will update the results released automatically, but you can change that if you wish, if results are going to be released a week later. And I'll update my unit of competency, and as I scroll down, I then have my assessments that fall underneath there, and you can see that the business case study actually now applies to every single unit because it is a holistic unit. So again, another benefit of doing those holistic units from the courses and assessments page is that when I add it to a class, I add it to each unit. Okay, so let's have a look. If I just go ahead and submit that, and I'm then going to go into my timetable example 1, and I'm going to enroll myself. I don't know which one it is. Okay, the ABC loan. I'm just making sure that I enroll the right person so that I can show you my student portal. And we can see the assessments here. You can see if I hover over them as well what units they relate to. I can change the due date for this one particular student. Because it's me, I'm going to give myself an extension. And I'll enroll contact. And if I just go back to the enrollment page, we can see my assessments here. So I can jump in and I can say, all right, Kat has submitted her theory work via email. Okay, but I can't assess it just yet. So if I go back, you can see the little asterisks, and I'll speak about each of these soon. And I'm also going to go in here and submit evidence. Remember, this one's a holistic one, so I'm submitting evidence. This was by fax.
Because someone lives in the past.
And certificate 1 in business, and upload. Okay, and again, I'm not going to assess, so I'll go into here, and actually I'm going to go into the trainer, and I'm going to say, I'll drop down this little expansion button that shows me my attempts.
Now, can I just say something before you jump in there, Kat? This is crucial, and it's something that even some of our clients that have been using this area for a very long time, I notice when I go into the system that they may not be, doing this 100%. So it's very, very important once you know that there's an assessment submission there, and you'll be able to see, because it'll actually say assess against, that particular assessment within, say, the group view or the class view.
Yeah.
It will also have the little, so Kat might describe it here or show you here. We can see that, well, probably less bulk mark assessments, but more just click on a unit, any of these units. Yeah. We got there. So yeah, at this point we can actually see here there's something sitting here which says assess. So that there is a submission here, whereas for me sitting in the class, I can actually change this due date. So that's the only option I've got right now, because there's nothing that's been submitted against me. So something to note here, obviously, is that we can see the Kat has a submission there. We can also tell by the fact that I have little orange, I call them flowers or stars. You just call it an asterisk. It's probably more accurate, but I like to call it a star. So it's, it will be quite obvious that there is a submission there. But the only other way, I guess, that you can see is if we do drill into a particular subject and scroll down, we can see we've got little black windows here to actually expand. If you didn't have a submission at this point, that would be just a grayed out little box there, so you wouldn't actually be able to drop that down. Now, the point that I was going to get to is that it's crucial that you actually do drop this down and you're marking or recording results against this attempt. So by clicking on that, that's going to open up for you to be able to mark it. If you come straight in here, into, say, Kat, and go into Kat's unit here to mark a few of these assessments, we scroll down and we go straight into record result, we're actually recording a second submission. So that's something very important just to note, is that you want to actually record a result against the submission here. And to do that, as I said, we just click. So that's just something I know, because I've seen it, even clients of ours that have been using this particular tool for years, they actually use the record result straight away. And the record result can be very, very useful if you're not trying to then upload assessment evidence as well. So you're going straight in to record the result as opposed to uploading a file. So anyway, I thought I'd just make that
it is very, very important. Katie's been beating me to the punch this whole session, so she's been coming in at the perfect times to explain the importance of those areas. But let's talk about a realistic situation when I use this. So a lot of you may be aware that we run a certified partners program here, and a partner needs to go through a lot of training, and then they need to go through a in-depth assessment demonstration that's followed up by a survey that I do. And the survey is a quiz that obviously I'll be using with our new assessment engine, but I have previously been using in the past with these surveys. So their data and their evidence sits within my survey area. So what I do is against the demonstration, I submit evidence, which might be the recording of the session or a scanned copy of the notes against the questions, and then I record the result for the second assessment, which is the quiz, which the data already sits in aXcelerate. So that's the two reasons, and we'll have a look. If I press record result, I get pushed to this page where I'm saying, okay, they received 85 today, and
85 out of 80, you'd be doing pretty well, Kat.
Oh, I thought that was, I was reading that as the minimum. Sorry, 65. 65 out of 80, the minimum passing score. Fantastic work. I can submit a marked file here, and I won't email. And as I submit assessment results, what you would notice is it still says assessed because the first attempt has not been assessed. So if I go into Kat's profile, it still looks like it hasn't been completed.
So another good example, this was actually, I was out on site with a client recently, and this was sort of almost troubleshooting a problem that they have. They record and they do videos of students doing practical demonstrations of I think it was more of building, construction, that sort of thing, and they had to perform certain things like hammering in a nail, for example. And some of their videos were quite large. So they were kind of in a pickle because every time they tried to upload them, because the files were so huge, you know, it just didn't really work out, and it was just too big of a file to store in aXcelerate. So the solution that we came up with was that they were going to then upload their video recordings to something like Google Drive, grab the link after that had been uploaded, go straight into record result and pop the link straight into the comments area. So that's just another way of using this without having to actually upload a file. You know, that could be another solution as well. So that's just another random example, but if you have that sort of problem, we might cover off that as well. Anyway,
all right. So I might just drop down here and I'm going to delete that first submission. So I've now deleted assessment 1. And there's the third one there for some reason. Delete that one too. Okay, so now I've just got attempt 2 out of 5, so it doesn't delete my first attempt. I should have marked that as failed. But as I go into Kat, and I then go into her assessment, which I forget what I called it. That one, I think. No. I'll just go back this way. Go back to the enrollment, and I scroll down. Now I can see that that's got a little tick next to it. So let's say, for example, that Kat didn't do too fantastic of a job, and for this first attempt, she's actually failed. Unsatisfactory, insufficient evidence. You did not answer question 5. I can upload my mark file with all my comments and submit assessment result. And I have this red X. So if I scroll down, I can see assessment submitted, red X. If I go into my student portal, I might just have a look at what that class is called. Timetable example 1. Ooh. And if I go into the student portal and find timetable example 1, this one, I would then see exactly the same codes here. So it's a very quick pushover, I guess. It's real time, and the student sees exactly what you see. So we've got the orange flower, or the orange asterisk, so I call it, or star, that signifies that there has been a submission. A grey circle signifies that there's an assessment against that unit of competency, but there's been no attempts. A red X means that it was insufficient or unsatisfactory, and a red tick means it's satisfactory.
Green tick means it's satisfactory.
Yeah, green tick means it's satisfactory.
Red tick.
And we also have settings which we can turn on for you that says, well, if a student has completed all assessments and all e-learning that's associated to that unit of competency, then automatically set the status to competent. So it automatically update the unit of competency for you. So I like one of the things.
Show an example of actually downloading a task sheet if there is one. Sorry.
So going into this example is that I can go into the view assessment task sheet. You can see here unable to submit against the subject with a final status because I'm competent. So I might just I've got a credit transfer. So I'll just go into here and I'll go into my contact profile and just remove those credit transfers just so we can use this as an example. So you can also see how you can quickly change statuses. Okay. So let's jump back into my student portal. And in my timetable example 1, I'm just going to jump into here. And we can see how I can download the assessment task resource, which is my task sheet, certificate 1 and business details. If I had a writable PDF, I could write my answers, for example, and then I would upload. So upload another submission, and I can do a simple drag and drop.
Oh, again, people can't see your screen. Do you want to just go into the share options and just share your whole desktop so that people can see, just so that we can see it? Desktop 1, yeah, and then share.
Desktop 1. Okay.
Cool. So now you can actually have a look and see.
I can't move this.
Just.
Sorry, something was in my way.
All right, there you go.
Okay, so you can see, I'll just do this again so you can see what happened as a pop-up. So I press upload another submission, and then a little pop-up appears. And I can add file or I can drag and drop. So if I go into my Finder and I get out of my pictures, and I'm just going to go into here, I can drag and drop, and I've uploaded my file. And I'll submit assessment and close window. And now if I go back to my qualification level and I scroll down, we can now see it's turned back to that yellow asterisk that there's been a new submission. If I jump in as well, I can see the next assessment there.
Or next
on the next submission, sorry.
Yeah.
So if I go back into my administrator portal and I go into Kat's record, or go into the class, I can do it either way. I can simply go in now and I can scroll down to that second attempt. I can also go in from this, from the class level, like we did before, and go into the unit and see it says assess. Alternatively, I can go into bulk actions and bulk mark assessments. And here I can see the assessment for the business writing. I can select on it and say that it was satisfactory.
So that's if you're just really trying to mark, I don't know if there is an assessment, you have to have a submission first, I think. I think, yeah.
It's just the person.
Oh, right. Yeah, there you go. Awesome. Yeah, so this bulk update or mark all assessments tool is really just to be able to mark something quick and easily as satisfactory or not satisfactory, and for a whole class. Obviously you can untick people in that particular view, but you know, if you're performing something like, or if you're wanting to record someone satisfactory in, you know, performing a CPR on a dummy, and you don't necessarily have to, I don't know, upload a video, or you don't need to upload a task sheet around that. You just need to say, yep, they were satisfactory. That's a very quick way of doing that. So that's just one example. Now, the other thing I just want to check, did you talk about global assessments when you were talking about defaults?
No, I haven't.
Do you want me to just discuss that? So one extra little bit that Kat sort of, when she was setting up her defaults, didn't mention, but it's just, you may or may not use this as well. It's kind of just one of these things depending on your scenario. We do have, when we're setting up our defaults against a qualification, this concept of a global assessment task. So when we have global ticked, what that is essentially saying is that anywhere that you find this unit of competency throughout any qualification within the system, this is a global default. So it means that if I go and set up a new class and it's the Cert 1 in business and it's got a particular assessment against it, and my default against the Cert 1, oh, here we go. Yeah, let's go set one up here. So if we go and add that, make it a global, say 10 days, yep, global, and then add. If that same assessment or same unit sits under the Cert 2 in business and I go and set up a new class within the Cert 2 in business, I am then effectively creating a new class, and that assessment will also be there as well. So that's just something else too. There's a good example. Yeah. So that's just if you do have common assessments, or if you have, say, assessment that might be sitting against, say, I'm just going to pull a random example, but against performer present, what's that? Presenter presentation.
Make a presentation.
Make a presentation. I was trying to pull that example. It's a bad example. You know, if that did sit under quite a few of your different qualifications and you had the same assessment task, doesn't matter where they're doing it or what level they're doing it, they need to still do that to their assessment. You know, that's just something else to be aware of.
And I guess the benefit here that we looked at, the example, oh my goodness, sorry. The assessment that we looked at here was when we've got multiple streams, you might have 5 different streams that you have, but all of them have the same core unit. So this example I used here was going into the Certificate 1 in Business Administration stream and setting the assessment against the core unit, making it global. And then I went into the second stream and saw that that core unit had this global assessment. So one final thing is that if you, in this default section, if I go into update, I can select who I can, it's a very poor example, it's not showing me anything, but if I just go back back into my qualification, add an assessment default. Poor demonstration again. I'm trying to find one that does not have a default.
They all do in this call.
Yeah, I'll go back to the other call. And in the default assessments, we saw that when we added a default, there's a little plus button to say, who would you like to email or submit on? And
our little green man, who I refer to, it's kind of a blue man, little green man. But
this little one here. And we can only select one person. So only one person can get that email. We can't, well, maybe we can't. No, I don't think we can add another one. Not in my experience. Anyway, unless something's changed. No, it's only one person. But what we do have is on our dashboard, we have a assessments widget, which is already on my dashboard. Here. So this one will show me any assessments that I have to mark as the trainer. Now this is directly related to the assessor that you put against the assessment. Okay, so
yeah, and if you have we have a lot of clients that don't necessarily want to put, one specific person as a default assessor against an assessment. So that will be whoever the class trainer is, whoever the enrollment trainer is, it'll just default to that person. But yeah, if all of your trainers had assessments and they have that little widget there, that makes it so much easier in terms of them being able to log straight in and see all of the submissions that they have to go straight in and mark. And as well as that, for administrators, we also have a report that can be run, which is our assessment submissions report, so that you can very quickly see whether, maybe your trainers are a little bit busy and you need to check in and see whether they're keeping on top of their marking. This is a very, very good way of doing that. So you could even have a look at submitted date is current week or something like that, or today. And this isn't a warehouse report either that Kat's running. So this should pick up what we've just filtered on. So just say even submitted today and have a look at some of our display fields.
I just want to highlight that you also then have assessment submissions. So you can say, look for assessments that have been submitted today that don't have an assessment result, for example.
Sure.
But if I just submit, I'll be able to find those assessments that I have uploaded.
Yeah, and I guess if we click back and we go into the fields, we can choose within the fields, whether it's marked or not marked, for example. So I don't know if I think it might be resulted. We've already got a result. Whoops.
So that's this one here. So I can see that one hasn't, unless she failed, I can see that that's not a result there. If I go into another example, this is actually a perfect example. This is what I was demonstrating today, is in my display fields, I have full name of student details. What I want to find is enrollment ID. Enrollee full name. Yeah. I'll delete that one there. And actually, I'll keep that one in as well so I can show you the difference. And if I submit, then where I have the enrollee full name takes me to not their enrollment page. Maybe it's enrollee ID. Okay. And if I put enrollment ID, get rid of that one and put it there, there, oops, there. Then I can say, okay, Kat, I'll go into this enrollment, and it brings me to the enrollment page as opposed to her contact page.
And I think that's pretty much everything in terms of assessments. But yeah, that's available to you now if you do want to start using assessments within aXcelerate. We do have, I'm sure you'll have seen our little pop-ups and that sort of thing for our online assessment feature that we've recently released, which is with our turbo version. This is not that. This is, slightly different to that. But yeah, it is a very, very good tool if you're looking for a solution to be able to upload and mark against and try and become more and more paperless, because you can definitely achieve that using this feature. Okay. So we might end things there.
Yeah, we don't have any questions that came through. We haven't got
any questions yet. Does anyone have any questions at all that they'd like asked? No. Okay. It's all good. If anyone has any follow-up questions after this session, please feel free to get in touch with us. But otherwise, we will bid you farewell.
Well, thank you very much for attending assessments today, and we look forward to having you on our future webinar.
Absolutely. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.
by aXcelerate.